All right. Okay, I'm going to make this our day 25 notes because today is day 25. Yes, we've got one more week left.
Can we just not have one more week?
We got this, guys. Okay, so let's make sure we feel really good about graphing compound inequalities before we get started on our practice quiz today. We're not solving any of these inequalities here. We're just graphing the answers. So let's start with number 1. And we're going to go through a couple of these. Can somebody read number 1 to me? How would I read this?
N is greater than or equal to 1.
Perfect. N is greater than or equal to 1. And what's the other half say?
And N is less than 5.
Perfect. And N is less than 5. So we have two different inequalities that are going to be included together. Anytime we have an AND inequality, we know that we're going to have two numbers circled and it's going to be shaded in the middle. Now we just need to decide whether our circles are opened or closed and where to put our numbers. So on a number line, I've always got a little minus or a negative and a plus or a positive to show that to the left, our numbers get smaller. To the right, our numbers get larger. So between the numbers 1 and 5, which number is smaller? 1. So we're going to put 1 closer to the minus sign since it's smaller. And so since we put 1 there, where should 5 go? On the other tick mark. Good. Okay, so step 1 is done. We've put our numbers on. Now let's decide whether our circles should be shaded or open. So we'll look at 1. I've got N is greater than or equal to 1. Is my circle going to stay open or do I shade it? Shade it. Why do I shade it? Yeah, because 1 is part of the solution. It says that N could be equal to 1. So we want to include it in our answer by shading it in. Okay, now we're going to look at N is less than 5. Do I shade my circle or leave it open? Leave it open. Good. 5 is not included. Now all we've got to do is, first of all, we know that AND inequalities we shade in the middle. But if we ever forget that, we can just look at the way our arrows or our symbols are facing. I know that N is greater than 1, so the arrow is pointing towards the right where the numbers get bigger, so I'll be shading this way. And N is less than 5, so I'm shading to the left where numbers get smaller. I can also look at my symbol like an arrow telling me what direction to shade from the 5. So we have our solution here. This is how we would graph N is greater than or equal to 1 and N is less than 5. Okay. Any questions? You got a question? Tick. I get you, girl. I get you, girl. All right, let's look at one with a negative number. Let's look at this number 4 here. Okay, so I have N is greater than or equal to negative 17 and N is less than or equal to 25. So we have two numbers that we need to put on our graph. We've got a negative 17 and a positive 25. What are we thinking, first impressions? Which number is going to go first? That's all right. Let's talk about it. So we are making a number line. Let's draw a little number line. I'm going to get a sticky note and do that. So remember, on a number line, we've got 0 in the middle, and then our numbers start positive this way, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and it goes on forever. So 25, positive 25, it's going to go somewhere on this side as the numbers get larger. Let's actually make this counting by maybe 5s. So here's 5, 10, 15, 20, sorry, it's a little sloppy, 25. Okay, so here's where my 25 is, right there. And let's see where negative 17 would be on the number line. So whenever I cross from positive numbers to negative numbers, I'm passing 0 on a number line. What's the first negative number I'll see? Negative 1. Good. So I'll have negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, and it's going to keep going. The negative numbers get bigger as we get smaller numbers. Just like if you have a larger negative number in your bank account, it really means that you have even less money. So as I get larger, maybe I've got negative 5, negative 10, negative 15, negative 16, negative 17. It's not to scale, let's just pretend. But we can now see, even though this isn't a perfect number line, it's not a perfectly accurate representation, we can see that negative 17 is going to be on the left because it is smaller than 25. We want to put the smaller value first towards the minus sign, towards the smaller numbers. We want to put the larger number towards the plus, towards the bigger numbers. So now that we've talked about this, which number comes first on my graph? Negative 17. Good. And what do I put here? 25. You guys got it. Okay, now let's look at our circles. I have n is greater than or equal to negative 17. Do I shade my circle or leave it open? Shade it. Good. That equal to makes it shaded. Means it could be negative 17. Now I've got n is less than or equal to 25. Do I shade my circle or leave it open? Shade it. Good. All right, now which direction am I going to be shading? On the outside of my points or on the inside? Inside. This is an and inequality. We're shading inside. We can also double check by looking at our symbols. N is greater than negative 17. My arrow points to the right. N is less than or equal to for both 25. My arrow points to the left. Okay. Good deal. Let's skip down to number 6. This one might be trickier with our negatives. This is an or inequality. Somebody read number 6 to me. What does that inequality read?
N less than negative 3.
Perfect.
Or n greater than or equal to 2.
Perfect. 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 So we've got 2 inequalities to graph. That means we've got 2 numbers we're looking at. Negative 3 and positive 2. So before we decide which number goes where, and you may already know, but if not, let's look at a number line again. I think sometimes drawing a number line can be super, super helpful. So I'm going to put 0 in the middle. Positives to the right, my negatives to the left. All right, what's my first positive number as I move to the right? 1. So I'll say 1, and I'll just keep going. 2, 3, 4, and it'll go on forever. And it looks like I have n is greater than or equal to 2, positive 2. So I'm going to make a little mark on this number line at positive 2. And now let's go backwards from the 0. So we're crossing from positive numbers to negative numbers. What would my first negative number be? Negative 1, then negative what? 2, good, and then negative 3. Okay, now my other number is negative 3. So I could make a little mark on my number line where negative 3 is. And you can see right here, this tells me exactly what order to put my numbers in. Negative 3 is smaller, so it goes first. 2 is bigger, so it goes second. All right, does everybody understand what we just did right here? Awesome. So go ahead and label your graph with negative 3 and 2 in the right order. Negative 3 coming first since it's smaller. Now let's make our circles. For negative 3, I'm going to circle my tick mark, and do I shade it in or do I leave it open? Leave it open. N is less than negative 3. There's no equal to. Now for 2, I'm going to draw my circle. Do I shade it or leave it open? Shade it. Good. N is greater than or equal to. All right. So I've got my dots. Now I need to decide, do I shade in the middle or on the outside? Outside. Can you guys tell me why you know that we're doing it on the outside?
Because greater, the less than is to the left, greater, or less than. Well, I'm looking at the arrows.
Yeah, the arrows are exactly how you should do it. I don't want you to just memorize or, because what if I accidentally write the wrong symbol or something? Now, I'm going to try real hard not to do that. I take your quiz before I give it to you myself. I make sure the questions are making sense. But, you know, you just never know. It's always good to be careful. So just like Geneva said, I've got N is less than negative 3. So I start from negative 3, and less goes to the left, and greater than or equal to 2. So from the 2, we go towards the larger numbers because N is greater than 2 or equal to. Okay, do we have any questions about number 6? You guys feel okay about that? Good. Okay, before we try our practice quiz, are there any other specific examples on this worksheet that are screaming at you that you would really like to go through before we do that? And we can always come back to this. I've got the answer key for this worksheet over on that table right here by my desk.
Do number 2, please.
Number 2, let's do it. All right. So I have N is greater than negative 2. And N is less than or equal to 3. So what's the first thing we need to decide before we make our graph? Yeah, we need to decide which number is going to go where on our graph. So we decide that by figuring out which number is bigger, which number is smaller. Smaller number comes first in the order of numbers. So let's do a number line. Now I'm going to give you one quick little trick that will always work. Anytime that you have a negative number and a positive number, which one is always smaller? The negative. If you have a negative and a positive, the negative number will always come first. Always. That's because whenever we look at our number line here, I've got 0 and my positives are on this side and my negatives are always on the left side here. So it wouldn't matter if this was negative 2, negative 1, negative 10 million. If it's a negative number and the next number's positive, it always comes first. Always.
No matter how big that.
No matter how big or
That's what I
small.
get in my head.
Yes. The only part that we have to be real careful on is when we have 2 negative numbers. If you've got 2 negative numbers, then we need to think which one is smaller. So again, we are going to start from 0 and go backwards with our negatives. I've got -1, -2, -3, -4, and it gets bigger as we go to the left. Now, even as a negative number gets bigger, we remember that it's actually a smaller value. Bigger number negative is a smaller value. I like to think of it as money. If I have -$1 million, the $1 million sounds great, but that would be a horrible situation to be in because really it means you owe that much. That's the smaller value there. And then our positive numbers, we just count like normal, 1, 2, 3, 4, going on and on and on. So my two numbers are -2 and 3. I can find them on my number line right here and here. So we can see which one comes first and second in this case. Where do I write each of my numbers now?
-2 on first.
Perfect. -2 comes first and then 3. And let's go ahead and just finish this graph. I'll draw my circles. -2, do I shade it or leave it open? Leave it open. 3, shade or open? Shade it. Good. And now, which direction am I shading? Outside or inside? Inside. Yes, because our symbols tell us to. From 3, we have an arrow pointing inwards. From -2, we have another arrow pointing inwards. Awesome. Does that help clarify some things for you guys? Yeah, good. Good, good, good. Okay, let's go ahead and pull out that practice quiz I gave you. We're going to go through these. And my plan is to have our quiz tomorrow, guys. I know I'm kind of throwing it on you last second. But we've gone over everything in our unit. So I think we're ready. You all have been getting 5 out of 5s on your exit tickets. You guys have been understanding it. You know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you're doing a really good job. So if there's anything you're still confused about, really today is a great time to ask so that you can be prepared. Okay, so on your practice quiz, you're going to see, first of all, I've got a note that says make sure your answers are obvious. Please do not draw an open circle like this, like I showed you here. I can't tell if that's open or closed. Make it super clear what your answer is to me. Give me big, large circles, whether they're shaded or open. I need it to be obvious so that I know for sure what to count right or wrong. Any questions about how to write your answer? All right, let's look at numbers 1 through 4. Number 1, what does this inequality say? Perfect. N is greater than 3. So remember, there's 3 steps to graphing an inequality. And we can make a little key out to the side. This is how I'm going to be. Let me grab an answer key actually, because I'm going to show you how I'm grading your quiz so that you know what I'm looking for. Let's see, I put this to the side. All right, let me pause this real quick and find that. Okay, I am looking on your quiz for 3 things. I'm looking for you to have the correct number labeled on your graph. I'm looking for whether your circle is open or shaded, and I'm looking for the direction that your graph is shaded as well from the number. So those are the 3 things I'm looking for. Each of these questions will be worth 3 points. And here, I'll write that little key. 3 points. If you want to know that, these first 4 are going to be worth 3 points each. And here's a second key for you. 1 point, correct number. Second point is for open or shaded circle. And your third point is for shaded direction. Okay, so step 1, what number am I labeling for number 1 here? 3. That's the only number they give me. Circle, open or closed? Open. Good. Make your circles very nice and large and open so I can really tell what it looks like. And which direction do we shade? To the right. Why are we shading to the right? Yes. This says that n is bigger than 3. We can see that the big opening is facing the n. Be larger than 3. So that means we shade where 3 is getting bigger. Any number bigger than 3 could be n. We can also think of this as an arrow. It tells us to shade this way. Awesome. Questions on number 1? Okay, number 2. What's my number? Perfect. N is greater than or equal to 100. How am I going to graph that? Perfect. 100 on the tick. Circle. Shaded or open? Shaded. Good. And to the right again. N is greater than or equal to 100. So we're going to shade where it's bigger than 100. And we can also look at our symbol as an arrow if we want. It points to the right. So we shade to the right. Any questions on number 2? Number 3. N is less than 1. How do I graph that?
Above the point.
Yep, label 1. How about my circle? Open circle. Shade left or right? Left. I have n is less than 1. So I want to shade where the numbers are smaller than 1, where they are less. We can also look at it like an arrow pointing in the direction that we shade. All right, let's look at number 4. N is less than or equal to negative 12. What do I do first? Yep, let's label our tick mark negative 12. Now what? Circle and shade or open? Shade. Good. And then what direction do we go? To the left. Perfect. Perfect, perfect. Okay, how do we feel about those, guys? We feel okay? Good. Let's look at the next section. Here we are solving the inequalities for n, and then we are drawing the graph. So let's begin with number 5. I have n minus 2 is greater than 7. What's my first step here? Plus 2. We're using inverse operations, guys. It's just like solving an equation, what we did last unit. Yes, and on the 7. What happens to my 2's? They cancel out. So I'm left with n is greater than 7 plus 2? 9. Okay, n is greater than 9. And I made this a little close to here on accident, so I'm going to label my graph below this time. Either way is fine, above or below. I just didn't give myself enough room. Okay, what do I do next? Circle the tick mark. Do I shade it?
No.
Nope. And what direction do I color? To the right. Good job. N is greater than 9, so we shade where the numbers get bigger than 9. We can also look at it like an arrow pointing to the right. Very good. Any questions on 5? Okay, number 6, I'm going to rewrite this below so that I have a little more space. I have 6 times n plus 3 is less than or equal to negative 21. What should I do first to solve this? Good. Subtract 3 from both sides. Now we've got 2 negative numbers here, so let's really think about what our answer is going to be for negative 21 minus 3. First I'm going to bring down 6 times n is less than or equal to. Now, what is negative 21 minus 3? Yes, negative 24. We can also think of subtracting, like adding a negative. So if I was doing negative 21 plus negative 3, maybe that's a more simple way of understanding that this will give us negative 24. We're adding a negative there. Okay, I'm left with 6 times n is less than or equal to negative 24. What's my next step? Yes, we want to divide by 6 to get rid of that multiplication. My 6's will cancel. And I'm left with n is less than or equal to whatever negative 24 divided by 6 is. Negative 4. Good. And on your quiz, I would really like for you guys to circle the answer you found for that inequality before you graph it. So we just circled n is less than or equal to negative 4. So now let's move on to our graph. How am I going to graph this? Perfect, negative 4. Circle it. Shaded or open? Shaded, because it could be equal to, that's what our symbol tells us. What direction? To the left. Good job. All right, let's go to the next page. Here's where we get a little bit trickier. Yep, you do have a bonus question on there that we'll get to. And that bonus question is worth 5 points. 5 bonus points. If you get them wrong, you don't miss 5 points. Excuse me, I'm stuttering. But if you get them right, you get 5 bonus points. So let's look here first. Now I have number 7. It's the same directions. We're just solving and graphing the inequalities. So can somebody read the inequality in number 7? Mm-hmm.
Plus negative over 4 and 5.
So we've got negative 2 plus n divided by 4, good, is less than, that's all right, negative 12. All right, what's our first step? Good, plus 2 to get rid of that minus 2. Now, whenever we add to a negative number, think about what it does to that negative. It's not going to be negative 14, I'll tell you that right now. It won't turn it to a positive. Here, let's draw a quick number line. I want to make sure we understand this. Yeah, so if we start at negative 12 and we add 2, that means we go to the right. Negative 11, negative 10. Yeah, so we're going to get negative 12 plus 2 is negative 10. And we'll bring down our n divided by 4 is less than negative 10. What's my next step? Perfect. Multiply both sides by 4. My 4's with my n cancel out. So I'm left with n is what? Less than, good, negative 40. No, you're okay. You're okay. Perfect. Perfect. So we circle that answer. And what comes next? Perfect. We want to label our tick mark with negative 40. Circle the tick mark. Left shading. Shade to the left. Very good. Because n is less than negative 40. Now, if you guys are curious about points, I was telling you the first 4 are worth 3 points. I'm going to give you kind of a key for the whole quiz. So numbers 5, 6, 7, and 8, those are going to be worth 4 points each. And here's what those points are. First of all, I'm looking for the correct answer. Okay, so I'm looking to see that you got the correct number when you solved for n. So I'm going to say correct n. So there's only 1 point there for that. The other 3 points are just going to be that you labeled your graph. So you put number labeled, even if it's the wrong number. Like let's say I got 765. Let's say I accidentally subtracted 2 on number 5 and I got n is greater than 5. I would lose 1 point for getting the wrong number for n, but if I still did my graph correctly, I would get all 3 other points, okay? Because I don't think that is fair to have you lose 4 whole points for just getting 1 step wrong. So you can still get points even if you get the number wrong. So number labeled on tick mark. The second point here is circle. So that's either open or shaded. And the other point comes from direction. So those are all 4 points each. And that's what I'm looking for. Does anybody have questions about the way that we'll be grading this? Okay, I'll give you guys a minute to copy that down if you want. All right. Let's go back to our problems. Let's look at number 8. I've got -5 plus 4 times n is greater than 15. What should I do here? Add 5. Good. Plus 5 to both sides. What happens next? Cancel out your 5s. Bring down 4n. It's greater than 20. Good. All right, what's our last step?
Divide.
Perfect. Divide by 4. And that's going to leave us with n is greater than 5. So we circle our answer for n. And how do we draw the graph?
Circle, put the 5 above the tick.
Perfect. Label our tick mark with the number 5.
Circle.
Circle. Shaded or open?
Open.
Open. Good. In which direction do we shade?
To the right.
To the right, where numbers get bigger because n is bigger than 5. Okay, any questions on number 8? All right. Number 9 and 10, these are our exceptions to the rules. On your quiz tomorrow, these exact types of problems with the exceptions are going to be in the exact same spot on your quiz. It's going to be the same layout. I try to make sure that you know what to expect. So if you want to write any notes on this part of your practice quiz to explain how to do this process, if you think you might forget, this would be a great place to do that because you'll be able to use this as your notes. So let's start by looking at number 9. What do we have here? What needs to happen? Yes, so we have -8 times this quantity in parentheses times 2 minus n. We cannot get rid of either of these 2 or the n until we get rid of the parentheses. So we're going to distribute first. And when we distribute, what operation is that? Good. Multiplication. So I'm going to write distribute, and in parentheses, I'm going to say multiply. Okay. So now let's multiply each of the terms inside the parentheses by this -8. first, what is negative 8 times 2? Good, negative 16. Now I have negative 8 times negative n. First of all, what's going to happen to that minus sign? It's going to become a positive number. A negative times a negative makes a positive. So we can go ahead and put a plus after the 16. And we can just think of this as 8 times n. What's that? 8n. It'd be 8n. We're doing 8 times n. So remember, if there's no number next to a variable, like, let me draw out a little sticky note. I have n. How many n's are there? 1. This is the same thing as 1n. So if I did 8 times 1n, it's the same thing as 8 times 1, which is 8, and we add the n on the end. All right, is anybody confused about that process? I know multiplying a variable is a little bit confusing. We haven't gotten to go over a lot of that lately. We did in the last unit, but this time we haven't as much. Is anybody feeling lost about that process? We feel okay about it? Good, good. Okay, so we got negative 16 when we multiplied negative 8 times 2. Then we did negative 8 times negative n, and that's going to be what? 8n. Good, because those negatives cancel. They turn into a plus. What do I do next? Yes. Bring down the rest of the inequality. Greater than or equal to negative 24. Now we can start using our inverse operations. Yes. Plus 16 on both sides. My 16s will cancel. Perfect. Bring down 8 times n. Greater than or equal to. And what is negative 24 plus 16? Negative 8. Good job. All right, we are to the final step. What do we do here? Say that again. Divide. Good. I thought I heard you say add 8. I was like, no, not quite. That's all right. Okay, so our 8's cancel. That gives us n is what? Perfect. Greater than or equal to, what's negative 8 divided by 8? Negative 1. N is greater than or equal to negative 1. And we circle that answer. So how do we graph this? Perfect. Label negative 1 on the tick mark. Circle it. Do we shade it or leave it open? Shade it. Good. And what direction do we color? To the right. Beautiful. That's it. Any questions on number 9? Okay, let's do number 10. Okay, we've got something going on here that is not going to allow us to subtract 4 or to divide by 3 yet on the 3n plus 4. We have to get rid of this fraction. Yes. So whenever I see an entire side of an equation over a number, I'm just dividing by that number. This is 3n plus 4 divided by 2. To get rid of division, we just multiply. So I'm going to multiply by 2 on both sides. And what happens to my 2's? They cancel on this side of the inequality. So what am I left with?
Plus 4 greater than or equal to 66.
Perfect. I'm left with 3 times n plus 4 is greater than or equal to 16. Awesome. What's next? Wonderful. We're subtracting 4 on both sides. Those 4's cancel, so I'll bring down 3n is greater than or equal to 16 minus 4. What's that? 12. All right, we're nearly done. One more step. What do I do here? Good. Divide by 3. Those 3's cancel, and I'm left with n is greater than or equal to, what's 12 divided by 3? 4. N is greater than or equal to 4. So we circle that answer for n. And how do we graph this answer? 4 over the tick mark. Yes, and we shade our circle because 4 is included in what direction? To the right. Awesome. Awesome, awesome. Okay. So, if you were curious about points again, I'm going to keep you on here. Number 7 and 8 are both worth 4 points. Same thing, I'm looking for the same 4 things I told you before. Numbers 9 and 10 are worth 5 points. The reason they're worth 1 extra point is because I'm also going to grade to see if you did the distribution correctly and the times 2 or times whatever part of the fraction is there correctly. So remember, even if you do just that part wrong, you can still earn points in every other area. This quiz is worth more points than our other ones, so missing a point doesn't affect you as much as it might in a previous quiz. Okay, last 2 questions, guys. I'm just asking you to do 2 compound inequalities, and before we do them, here's how I'm grading them. I am going to grade each of these answers as sort of as 2 separate questions. So 3 points for number 11, 3 points for this other part of number 11. So 11 is 6 points total. Alright, and same with 12. 6 total points because there's so many parts to a compound inequality. So whenever we're doing a quiz, I understand quiz anxiety and test anxiety, and you get in there and you might feel a little blank or like, I swear I knew this before and now I'm freaking out. If you get into a problem and you feel like you are not sure how to do a certain part of it, at least do the parts you do feel confident about, because missing 6 points for not even trying is going to hurt a lot more than doing your best and messing up on maybe 1 or 2 things. Okay, so at least attempt it. At least attempt it. But I think you guys will do even better than attempting, and I think y'all are going to kill this. Okay, let's look at 11 and 12. I want you to solve and graph each of the following compound inequalities. So for number 11, we have an inequality with or. Number 12, we have and. So let's start with 11. Before we can talk about the graph, we need to figure out what our values for n are on both of these. So let's go left to right. We'll start with this side. Negative 8 plus 7n is greater than 20. What's my first step to solving? Plus 8. Good. My 8's will cancel. So now I'll bring 7 times n down. Is greater than 20 plus 8 is 28. Okay, what is my next step here? Divide by 7 on both sides. My 7s will cancel. And I'll get n is what? N is greater than 4. Good. And then we'll circle our answer. Okay. So I know whenever we flip to this page, maybe it's just me thinking this, but whenever I see these problems, I'm thinking, oh my God, that looks like so much work. But when we break it down step by step, it's not too bad. It's just, it looks like a lot whenever you're seeing the big picture, but when we get down to it, we're already halfway done with this. Okay, it's not too bad. We got this. Let's do the second half. We got n is greater than 4 for our first part of the compound inequality. Now I have 3 plus 10 times n is less than negative 77. What's my first step? Yes, subtract 3 on both sides. So I'm going to have what left over? Yes, 10 times n is less than negative 80. Good. Okay, give everybody a second to catch up to that point. Now we have 10 times n is less than negative 80. What is my next step? Divide by 10. Both sides, perfect. Okay, my 10s cancel out, and that leaves me with what? Perfect. It's like my zeros cancel over here. Negative 8 over 1 is negative 8. N is less than negative 8. Okay, now here is the part where we need to be very careful. Just because we solved n is greater than 4 on this side does not mean that we just drop it down and write 4 on the first tick mark. Just because we got negative 8 on the right side doesn't mean we drop it down and put negative 8 right here. We need to think about which number is larger and which number is smaller. Yes, negative 8 comes first. A negative number is always smaller than a positive number. It doesn't matter what the numbers are. If it's negative, it's smaller than the positive. Okay, so now let's decide how we're going to circle our tick marks. Negative 8, am I going to leave my circle open or do I shade it? Open, good. What about 4? Open. Okay, now do I shade in the middle of my numbers or on the outside? Oh, let's think about it. I heard 2 different answers. One is correct. I want you to feel good about why. Let's look at our symbols. N is greater than 4. So let's look at our 4. Where would I shade to show that it's bigger than 4? To the right, because I see my arrow pointing to the right of 4. So I'm going to shade here. Now let's look at negative 8. I have n is less than negative 8. So I look here at negative 8. Where do my numbers get less? Where do they get smaller? To the left. My arrow is also pointing to the left. So most of you said that correctly. Shade on the outside. But that's all right. That's all right. That's why we just got to take a step back, slow down, make sure we know why we're writing. We don't want to get into speedy mode and be like, all right, I got my numbers, I'm just going to shade it. You know, make sure you know why you're shading where you're shading. Okay, any questions on number 11? Okay, let's look at 12. This is the last one before the bonus. We've got 10 times n plus 3 is greater than or equal to 53, and 8 plus 7 times n is less than 57. Let's look at our first inequality, 10n plus 3. What do we do first? Yes, we want to subtract 3 first. And that's going to leave us with what? Mm-hmm.
greater than or equal to 50.
Good. 10 times n is greater than or equal to 50. Okay. What comes next?
We have
Perfect. Divide by 10 on both sides.
10's cancel.
Uh-huh.
We have
N is greater than or equal to 5. Perfect. Everybody get that? Awesome. Let's look at the next one. I have 8 plus 7 times n is less than 57. First step, what do I do?
Minus 8.
Minus 8.
57.
Awesome. My 8's cancel. And I'm left with what underneath now?
7.
Mm-hmm. Is less than 57 minus 8. 49. Good. Okay. Now I have 7 times n is less than 49. What should I do next?
75.
Divide by 7. You guys, I could just explode. I feel so proud of you guys. I just think back to the first week of class and how much we struggled just with adding negative numbers. And you guys are doing the most complicated things right now. Like, if you looked at this on the first week, I think y'all would have had a panic attack. And you're doing it flawlessly right now. I'm so blown away by you guys. Okay, interruption over. What's happening here? Okay, 7's cancel, and I'm left with n is less than what? 7. Good. Okay, guys. Now we need to decide which number goes where.
The 7 goes, no, the 5 goes.
Yes. So out of 5 and 7, 5 is smaller, so it comes first. 7 is bigger, so it comes second. We can also look at the plus and minus and remember that as we go to the left, we see smaller numbers. As we go to the right, we see bigger numbers. So 5 goes here, 7 goes here. And what do we do next? Yes, we want to circle our tick marks. For 5, do I shade it or leave it open? Shade it. N is greater than or equal to 5. And for 7, shade it or open? Open. Good. Now, am I shading in between my numbers or on the outside?
Between the numbers.
Between. Good. Good, good, good. We can double check that we shaded in the right spot by looking at our inequalities. I know n is greater than or equal to 5, so I'm shading to the right, which we did. And n is less than 7, so we shade to the left of 7. Perfect. All right, any questions on those, guys? All right, here's your bonus question. It's only one question, but it's worth up to 5 bonus points. So before we do it, let me give you a little bit of a key for what I'm going to look for to get those points. So first of all, you have plus 2 possible points. So the 1 is the correct n for the first inequality, and then the other plus 1 is the correct n for the second inequality. So that's 2 possible points just for getting both answers right. The next points, okay, and I remember I had 5 total, is the correct shading for your circle. So if you shade one circle correctly, you get a half a point. If you shade both of them correctly, that's a whole bonus point. The next thing that I'm looking for is the direction that you shade. If you got them shaded in the right direction, that's a bonus point. And even if you get your N wrong, you get a bonus point for putting a number on the tick marks. So just having your graph labeled correctly, that's bonus. So numbers on ticks, that's a bonus point, half a point for each. Okay, so if you want to have that key written down, you're welcome to. If not, we're about to get to it. So I'll give you guys a second to write if you are copying. Okay. This is a tricky one. We've got variables on both sides, guys. Woo! Those are fun. Those are fun. Okay, so let's think way back to combining like terms. We are always trying to get our n's on one side of the equation. Now this is an inequality, so we want our n's always to come first. If we put our n's on the opposite side over here of our inequality, we're going to have the incorrect graph. We want our n's to be brought to the left side, to the first part of our inequality. So let's make a little note. Remember, your answer should be n first is either less than or greater than or something, a number. Your n needs to be on the left side of your inequality. So that means whenever we are solving and we are trying to get our n's together, do not do minus 6n right here. Do not do minus 6n and bring it to the right side. Bring your 5n to the left side. We want our n's to be on the first side of the inequality so that our answer reads n is greater than a number, or n is less than a number. We don't want a number is less than or greater than n. N needs to come first. All right, n is first. Okay, so just to make sure that we've got that, what should we do first here for negative 4 plus 6n is greater than 5n minus 6? Yes, let's get all of our n's on the same side. So we're going to subtract 5n from both sides. And since there's an n attached, we remember that we're writing minus 5n. Don't just write minus 5, because you might accidentally put it on your negative 4 over here. You want to be very specific about labeling every step. So what happens to my 5n's? They cancel. Those are gone. Now I'm going to bring everything down and figure out this problem here. So I've got negative 4. Bring that down. What is 6n minus 5n? 1n. So I'm just going to write plus n, because I know you can put 1. It's just whenever you find your answer, n is greater than something, you'll have to divide by 1 at the end to get rid of that 1. Because I don't want your answer to say 1n equals, or 1n is greater than something. You'll have to get rid of the 1 later. But you can keep the 1. If that helps your brain understand what just happened there, you can keep the 1. That's fine with me. Okay, so now I've got negative 4 plus n, or 1n. And what else do I bring down? Greater than -6. Okay, I almost have n by itself now. What do I do next? Yep, +4 to both sides. My 4's will cancel. And this is where having no 1 next to the end is helpful, because then I can just bring down and I have n is greater than my number. I don't have to get rid of the 1. So what is -6 plus 4? -2. Be careful with your negatives. -2. Good, good, good. Okay, so I have solved this side of the compound inequality. Now we need to do the other. I gave you a super tricky one for this one. Sorry, guys. Okay, I have -3 times the quantity of 2 minus 7n. That's all in parentheses. And that's less than or equal to 24 plus 6n. Before we can do anything, what has to happen? Yes, we need to distribute first. Okay. So what is -3 times 2? -6. And what is -3 times -7n? Yes, positive 21 what? N. Good. All right, does everybody see where we got -6 plus 21n? I want to make sure we're all to that point before I move on. Is anybody confused about how we got to this point? You all got it? Good. Okay, what happens next? Perfect. We're just going to bring down the rest of our inequality. Less than or equal to 24 plus 6n. Now I have a regular inequality with variables on both sides. So what should I do next? Yes. Subtract 6n from 21n and cancel it on the other side. So what happens next? Now my 6n's are gone on the right side. -6. And then what's 21n minus 6n? Plus 15n. Good. Is less than or equal to 24. Okay. I'm going to give us a second to all get to that point. Is anybody confused about how we got to here? We all got it? Okay, so now I've got -6 plus 15 times n is less than or equal to 24. What do I do next? Plus 6 on both sides. My 6's cancel. Now I have 15 times n, I'm writing it over a little so I have room, is less than or equal to 24 plus 6, that's 30. And we have one more step. Divide by 15 on both sides. And that is going to leave us with, I'm going to write my answer below here. N is less than or equal to, what is 30 divided by 15? 2. Awesome. Okay, so now we have our two answers. N is greater than -2, and n is less than or equal to +2. First of all, I have a negative number and a positive number. -2, +2. Which comes first?
Negative.
-2. +2 comes next. Now let's do our circles. -2, is that open or closed? Open. +2, open or closed? Closed. We want to shade that circle. Now do we shade in the middle or the outside? In the middle. We have that n is bigger than -2, so we're shading to the right. We have that n is less than or equal to +2, so we shade to the left there. That's your answer, guys. Okay, it is perfect timing, 10:26. I went 1 minute over, guys, I'm sorry. No exit ticket today, okay? No exit ticket. All you need to do is just make sure you feel good about inequalities. We're going to take that quiz tomorrow. If you have any questions before then, please reach out. I am happy to answer them, and I hope you all have a lovely day.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.